I'll start over with a question, actually, for you, Vienna. You're on the left,
Okay.
right? And you admitted in
I mean,
chat,
sure, I guess.
you admitted in chat that you've never read any Hegel. Correct.
Mhm.
Now, you do agree, though, that some leftism, the general conception of people on the left, are influenced in some way by dialectics, which could trace its way back to Hegel, right? Like, is that too controversial, or is that
No, that's yeah, like
now what?
everybody likes to claim dialectical materialism without ever defining what that means. So yeah, this dialect is when there's two of something.
Now, now, if you find out that Hegel's like ideas of dialectical materialism or whatever, like led to people being murdered and slaughtered and like were just terrible, does that mean that like people now who might have been influenced or took parts of it and like carried it down the line are therefore guilty for being associated with Hegel in their theory? Is that how things work?
Jody, I'm a Marxist. Um, I already have that issue.
No,
Like,
sure. I mean, if you connect it to Soviet Russia, all that stuff. But even then, I mean, because you would argue as well, like I think I would, that like, even though I share a lineage with the same people who, you know, engaged in the Russian Revolution, right? That there's a lineage that we share. That doesn't mean that I agree with everything that happened during the Russian Revolution or the proceeding a communist state, right?
mhm.
At least I don't think that's the case. So,
Actually,
sorry, go for it.
in terms of Hegel, I think whatever the fuck he did, I think he was right to do it, unless it was really bad. But I guess we'll find out about that one.
Well, what is bad is that the Russian Revolution is essentially the answer here. Is the idea that somehow, uh, because we all leftists are connected to Hegel in some way, and Hegel's theories led to the Russian Revolution, and they always bring in Hitler too, although they don't make a connection for how Hegel led to Hitler as well. But the idea is that because Hegel has this lineage with Soviet Russia and communist China, that therefore anyone who uses the dialectical method or critical theory is therefore bad because Hegel.
I got the Hegel Hitler connection already. They're German. We're
Well,
good. We got it.
I don't. They don't say. I don't. I can't remember how much Hitler comes up in the video we are gonna watch, but I will. I watched today. I watched a podcast of James's, and it was 3 hours and 49 minutes long. I watched it. I listened to it on two times speed, and all it was like this person did dialectics and this person did dialectics, and we'll watch it. I'll play a clip of it just to sort of like get the ins and outs. But I also want to just stage this as well because so part of the thing that we're going to see here is that there's this long heritage, everything's connected, therefore, all of leftism is bad because it shares this history with Hegel, which led to communism, the deaths of billions and billions, and it's evil and it's terrible, right? But in line with this is their arguments are going to be against any kind of emancipatory struggle whatsoever. And what I take from this is kind of ironic in a weird way because a lot of people on the new right or alt right, they tend to talk about the red pill, right? Which is the idea of like the world is all appearances, and then you take the red pill and realize that like the feminists are wrong and all these other people are wrong, and you get to see reality for what it really is. Like that's their position, right? But what James Lindsay and this other guy Michael O'Fallon, who does the Sovereign Nation stuff, their view is almost like the response of taking the blue pill, which is the idea is like we've solved everything. Society is fine. That like I would like to remain in the matrix, please. Do not disturb my comfort. Do not come and try to tell me that things are bad. Everything is fine. Shut up. Let me enjoy this steak in the Matrix, right? Which is the one character in the Matrix decides to take the blue pill, stay in the Matrix, and kills all his friends and all that. Can't remember his name. You know, the one character, and she's like, not like this, and then dies, and like, you know, it was a big scene.
No. They don't have that good of a memory for what happened in the Matrix movies.
This is just like the first.
Was he in the first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cypher. Yeah, okay. So the character's name is Cypher. Yeah. So the idea was ignorance is bliss. Yeah, exactly. Just leave me alone. Stop trying to like infect my mind. The other thing that's like an implication of their idea is that we've kind of reached the end of history, right? But in their mind, the end of history isn't a state of perfection, because for them, especially in sort of like Christian eschatology, the idea is that you can't perfect man on earth. We are fallen, we are sinful. Therefore, we're as perfect as we're going to get. And the only thing that we have to do now that we've reached perfection is sort of like self-improvement. And like, you know, in the parlance of Jordan Peterson, clean your room. Don't worry about changing the system. Don't worry about changing the structure. Who are you to even say you can change the structure? Just clean your room, fix yourself, and shut the fuck up, you know? And that is really at the core of all their argument, which is why it's like weird that this is something that's advocated by James Lindsay, who's a supposed atheist. Why I want to flag this now is because as we watch, this is the underlying theme that you're going to get throughout this whole thing. And they kind of even like admit it in the end, right? And it is super weird though, because they will push back on one thing. I guess the one part of like the red pilling that they're doing is being like, even though everything is fine and we live in the perfect world, there's these dialecticians infected with Hegel on the horizons that are advocating for trans rights and black people rights, and they're coming, and Hispanic rights and the women's rights, and they're coming and they're going to infect everything with critical race theory and postmodernism and neo-Marxism. And if you don't fucking stand up and fight it, we are all going to die. And here's the thing: if you don't think I'm kidding about how intense that process is, just watch. So this is Michael O'Fallon, okay? This is a speech he was giving at a conference that he ran for sovereign nations. This is the guy who funds James Lindsay. So James Lindsay runs a site called New Discourses. Michael O'Fallon owns part of that company. They work together. The video that we're going to watch in full is an interview between Michael O'Fallon and James Lindsay about Hegel. But in this talk that he gave at this conference, I'm not going to play the whole beginning. It's a lot of the same shit that we're going to get into here, which is like this theorist is connected to this theorist is connected to this theorist, and therefore all leftivism is all left theories are bad. But in this video, he's going to kind of like it reaches the apex of his speech, and just watch where he takes it. So I just thought it was worthwhile.
Apex?
Apex Legends?
Apex Legends?
The pinnacle? The pinnacle?
Respawn Entertainment?
Yeah. The pinnacle of his speech. Okay? Is that a better word? Here it goes.
Sure. I mean, Apex was fine also. It's a decent game.
Critical race theory is simply a tool. I think we've been over this many times.
It's a tool.
It's a tool of destruction. And intersectionality, after you have the destruction, after you have the implosion created by critical race theory, where everything is burnt to the ground, intersectionality is what comes along and takes all that rubble and builds it back again upside down. They build back better.
Again, I want to pause there to build back better. They buy in to this George Soros Great Reset conspiracy bullshit. But you were going to say something, Vienna.
He talks like a shitty elementary school motivational speaker. Like,
To me,
Like,
he
he's
talks
pausing
like a
and
white
waiting for people to be like,
evangelical
or like, I mean, they're the same thing.
Yeah.
You have to remember, I went to a Catholic school. These were not secular
Yeah, they overlap.
speakers at my elementary school.
No, fair.
Like, just this guy sounds like he's on a managerial course for McDonald's seminars for managers. Yeah, exactly. Like, it just sounds like he thinks he's being so profound and so like
Oh, he's
deep or whatever. Like,
you're gonna see it. He's gonna feel what he's saying.
in their terms.
ugh.
But they build back in a way that could only be held together with current modern engineering, with the kind of technology that you have today that can hold impossible structures up. If you've ever seen postmodern architecture, you would know what I'm saying. Bizarre shapes that there's no way that that can be held up. The base is this small and the top is that big. Because it's not natural.
He uses this analogy almost every time he fucking talks. And I have to say, this is a really, let's be real, stupid analogy, which his argument is like, it's impossible. It's not natural. It has a tiny base and yet it's big at top. Well, guess what? Engineers are not using postmodernism to design these buildings. They're using physics. They can figure out what materials to use, the laws of gravity. They could use the center of gravity, all this stuff to make this stuff work. It's not magical. It's almost like he sees a building in like a modern city and goes, "Whoa, holy shit! It's magic." And then somehow this relates to like postmodernism in like critical theory and all this shit. Like, these people are so silly.
But it can be done. So if it can be done, we should do it.
What?
So all of a sudden,
See, like, this is the
that
motivational speaker.
many folks that you would say have been
vague
saying these
affirmation.
things about critical theory, about critical race theory, that have been opposing critical theory and critical race theory. All these folks now are starting to jump on the bandwagon to say, yes, critical race theory is a problem, and critical theory is an issue. Great. What do you have to say about intersectionality? Silence. Again, can you talk to me about intersectionality? Well, I see some value in intersectionality. Because it follows an Augustinian framework. And intersectionality is a great way for us to understand still, okay, I see where you're going.
The Augustinian, he's Catholic.
He's actually not. He's
fucking Irish, isn't he?
But he's not Catholic. He's a part of the SBC Church, Southern Baptist Convention. His main thing is that
you fucking traitor.
Yeah. His main thing is that the Southern Baptist Convention has been infiltrated and infected by cultural Marxists. And so that's what he's trying to fix his own church by working with James Lindsay and Peter Boghossian to cleanse it, basically. The other thing is they are working with a Roman Catholic. I forget his name, but he's also a part of this somehow. And that he believes that the same thing, like the new pope is a postmodern neo-Marxist, and it's the same bullshit. But yeah. So, but he is, despite his name, he is not Catholic. I thought the same thing.
I can't wait.
Then, yeah.
I can't wait for Pope Marx the First.
Well,
it's gonna be so good.
Their argument is that Marxism is a religion, so maybe you're onto something. Maybe they're onto something. We're all onto things.
In other words, critical race theory and critical theory is a means to an end. The end, the future, to quote Ariana Grande.
Oh, we're getting Ariana Grande.
To quote several other pop stars. To quote several movie actors. To quote Kimberly Crenshaw. The future is intersectional.
Oh, shit.
And intersectionality is the perfect grid framework for everything. It's what promotes equity. It's what promotes diversity. It's what promotes inclusion. But in fact, what it promotes is discrimination.
There you have it. Promotes
See, like,
discrimination.
this is such a classic. This is a religious motivational speaker. Like,
I I just like this. Guys, go for it, Elron.
No, I was just saying this is it's hard to listen to.
I wonder, like, again, they never explain that. Like, and part of it is because you know that they can't explain it, right? Or they realize that they don't want to walk up against that line, which is that why is diversity, inclusion, and all this stuff racist or discriminatory, right?
I love the double think on it too. Like, considering people other than white men, that's discrimination. What?
Yeah.
How? How?
How? But are they going to say it? No, of course not.
It is systemic oppression.
I mean, that's the truth.
And just like it's always been, the thing that they accuse you of is what they're actually doing to you. That's what intersectionality
it's
is.
the funniest kind of projection.
I know it's like super projection because he's saying that we're projecting, yet they are the ones being racist, and then like
Just sitting up there in his big fucking white man suit, just being like, I'm oppressed. I am oppressed right now as I sit here with my whatever the fuck I do money, got my fuck you tie on. Clearly, I eat enough. And I'm fucking impressed. Fuck you, Michael O'Fallon. Jesus Christ.
yeah.
It is verified, checked, laws passed, legislated discrimination. Not based on merit,
We've legislated
on whether you earned
intersectionality,
it.
apparently.
Not based on opportunity, on whether you worked hard for it, whether you studied for it, whether you risked all for it. No. It's based upon your skin color, upon your ethnicity, upon what you believe, upon your ideas. And isn't it amazing that one of the ways that we start to get this to this area first with intersectionality is through public health. Let's remember something.
Oh, no.
He's not going to get into COVID denial, don't worry. But I mean, like, it's in the background. It's definitely in the background, right? I mean, that's what Build Back Better, the Great Reset. It's in the background, right? But they're not that explicit, right?
I love how at the end there, he like slipped in like it's about skin color. And at the end, he's like, it's about your ideas. I'm like, yeah, no, it definitely is. Like, no, Michael. Like,
It's about your ideas about skin color.
if you have really shitty ideas about society, yeah, we definitely want to have a conversation and address those. What the fuck? Of course it's okay to judge people off their ideas. What are you talking about? Just because you can have like free speech doesn't mean you can like have these shitty ideas. Like if you say, I think we should enslave all the black people, I'm gonna say no.
Yeah. But that's discrimination. Because you're making you Elron are now making it about race.
That's right. I forgot. By telling the white people they can't own black people as slaves, I made it about race.
You laugh? He's gonna get to it pretty much right now.
I know.
Let's go for it, right?
Yeah.
Way back in the late 1700s, there was another revolution, not ours here.
It's after this analogy, and then we'll get to it.
And Robespierre and the Jacobins, after they took King Louis and killed him, and ended the national constitution. And in that process, before the Jacobins really got going into their reign of terror, what did they impose for everybody, since there was really no constitution? The Committee on Public Safety.
Fuck yeah.
Now it's about your safety. It's not about your rights. It's not about what's guaranteed to you from the state and the agreement that we have as a citizen in a nation. Our contract is the Constitution. Oh, that's old stuff now. You go to see the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence in Washington, D.C. right now, you have to walk through the center first before you get up to the top room. You can no longer go up the steps and be right there. And what you're going to go through in that center below is you'll find out, you know, if you're an American Indian, that Declaration and Constitution is not for you. If you're an African American, that Declaration and Constitution is not for you. If you're a woman, that Declaration and Constitution is not for you. If you're Latino, that Declaration and Constitution is not for you. If you are Asian, that Declaration and Constitution is not for you.
I mean, like,
It was only for white males. That's who it's for. It doesn't include you.
yeah, he's being honest.
Yeah, but he's saying it in a sinister tone, don't you hear? So really,
Yeah,
what he's
but it's
trying
just
to
like,
say is
what?
that the Constitution actually was for all these people. That's why the Constitution allowed for slavery, right? Like,
I loved, and Vienna was right on board with this, of like his entire, like, it feels like he goes through all the motions when he brings up like the French Revolution or the US Constitution that would lead someone to say, yeah, these were good things. And then he just twists it at the end. It's like, oh, it's about public safety. It's like, no, it was definitely about the rights of the third estate in the French Revolution. And then the Constitution's like, it's just for white people. It's like, yeah, no, it was. It was really just for we weren't
white
people.
slaveholders.
Yeah, we weren't people.
Yeah.
In the first two drafts
It was
of our
literally-
country.
Yeah, like the 3/5 thing was literally in the Constitution.
Yeah, no, that was in there. That's
And-
how that worked.
And
How
then,
do you-
like, you went to
how
war
do
with
you
the
not-
indigenous people and just slaughtered them. Like that's the other part of it too, where he's like, indigenous people aren't included. They're telling you that indigenous people aren't included in the Constitution. Yeah, they were included as people to kill and cleanse.
They were
Like,
enemy combatants
They
of
were-
the state.
They were included as merciless Indian savages.
yeah.
I love that this is like the sovereign nations like thing too, because it's like, yeah, like they weren't even recognized as nations. They were recognized as just like things to murder. What, like, how little of US history, how little of global history do you have to know to like say this and not be like, this is fucking stupid,
So I
right?
want you to hold that thought for the last few minutes of this thing, because this is going to take a turn. And I'm curious from both of you and people in the chat about the sincerity here and whether it is or is not sincere and to what extent that matters or not. So let's check this out.
That's in the National Archives, folks. And how that hasn't been ripped out in this past administration, I've written them several times. That was planting the seed of deconstruction. We have a long way to go. It's going to take all of us. And hopefully by this fallible speech that I've given, hopefully you'll understand that we got to work together. If you want to save the church, you're going to have to stand a lot stronger and become a lot louder. You know, we stand on shoulders of giants. I lead tours through Germany, through Switzerland, through England, through Scotland, where men said, "Here I stand, I can do no other." And I can take you to the places where those men burned. So here I stand.
Is he trying to fake cry?
And I say to you,
I don't know that it's fake or not.
play the man. Play the man. And not just for the next month. Do it consistently now.
This is fake.
As if your life, your wife, your family, your home, your nation, and as if the gospel depends upon it. Put aside petty squabbles. Put aside the ascendancy of your ministry and how far you want to go. Because how far you might want to go might just bring you quicker to the guillotine. Now's the time to stand together. Now's the time to work together. We must beat this, and we must beat it today. Thank you.
This is just a call for white nationalism, isn't it?
Doesn't it feel like it?
This really
It feels
feels
like-
like such the most thinly veiled call for white collective action that I've ever heard.
So what do we think that was sincere? Vienno thinks that it was fake crying. I don't know.
Oh no, it's 100% fucking fake crying, but it's meant to stoke up the emotions
yeah.
of the audience.
No, like
I get the distinct
it
feeling
is-
that James Lindsay and him feel like really believe this shit.
Really?
But that's me.
Yeah, I think they really believe this shit, but they're also capable of like basic acting
Yeah.
for speeches. Like,
I don't know. That was a level of like, I mean, like, yeah, you can act it and like act that emotion, but that kind of choked upness and then like the squeaky voice and like, I don't know, that felt like he was losing control in a way that's very hard to reach as through acting and stuff.
And if I think about my dead grandmother, I'll cry and squeak my voice while talking about something mundane. Like, I think you can do it. I mean, like, at the end of the day, I agree with you that they probably believe this, but like, do they have the emotional conviction, gun to their head, the revolution's over, recant or die? I think they're going to choose recant. I don't think they're that mired in this.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a question of whether or not they're cowards, but there's another issue of just like, I don't know, like they spend, I mean, because listen, I'm gonna play a clip as well from this James Lindsay pod here that's 3 hours and 49 minutes long, okay? Titled Hegel, Wokeness, and the Dialectical Faith of Leftism. Now, the thing is, he obviously read some Hegel, he read a bunch of these theorists. Like, do you go through that effort to do all this if you're just, like, trying to create propaganda? Because you could probably do it without reading any of these people. Now, clearly, I feel like he reads them in a way that's not important. I mean, it's difficult because there's aspects in which he could read. There's other things where he could be getting PDFs and just like hitting Control F for dialectics. But I don't know. There's just elements of this of like they spend way too much time on this. They really do seem concerned about this, which seems really weird to me. But also it's they're getting money for it, so it could be the grifting aspect of it, and it could be the fact of like they are just conservatives and they hate Black people, women, trans people, sexual minorities speaking up for themselves. They really hate that. And they feel so aggrieved from it, it brings them to tears when they talk about it. And that's kind of where I land. I think they're just sad white boys that are so afraid of other people getting the things that they're afraid are going to be taken from them. But they're also grifters, though, so I don't fucking know. I don't know. At the end of the day, can't tell. But we'll... This clip, the reason why I wanted to play this clip is just to highlight the thread of what's happening here. The reason why they want to do Hegel, they want to do this, and it kind of like gets to how Michael ended that sort of talk, right? Which is that if we don't stop these people, we're all going to die. Because in their mind, what Hegel is sort of doing is that the leftists, through the dialectical sort of like back and forth, and we'll get that in a few seconds as well, they're heading, what they want is utopia. But to them, utopia is impossible, and therefore it can only lead to bloodshed because they're going to try to force a utopia that they can never get because the utopia is impossible, kind of thing. So most of their work is just like, in this 3 hours and 49 minutes, literally all I got from it was, here's Marcuse, here's Foucault, here's this person, here's that person, here's Kimberly Crenshaw. All these people are saying the word dialectics, and so therefore, and this is what we're going to get here. Now, I am going to speed it up a bit. And the reason why I want to speed it up is because James Lindsay is boring as fuck, especially when he's solo. So, so we will listen to it fast to kill some of this time. And I'm gonna most of this, like, he doesn't say anything like too interesting to that we might not need to pause on a lot. We're only gonna play like 5 minutes or so. But notice like how he's theorizing. Like he's gonna read some of it and go, "Oh, look, this word here," and like that kind of thinking, right? So this clip starts when he was just connecting Foucault and Marcuse to dialectics, and now he's talking about how critical race theory is connected to this lineage with Hegel. Jody, you do us a kindness by speeding this. Yeah, so here it goes. Let me know if it's too fast, okay? If it's all garbly, I listened to this on 2x speed. I right now have it on 1.75. So if it's still too fast, let me know. We'll figure it out.
So these are pretty consistent themes. They're ultimately Hegelian. Postmodern left is like this despairing, broken, let's not even try to do anything positive with
I
it.
don't know what the fuck
Whereas
this
all
is
of the
saying.
positive projects that came out of the dialectic are in the synthetic aspect, thesis, antithesis, then building a synthesis.
try one
and
and a half
the
of these.
postmodernists and even this later negative dialectic Adorno are kind of abandoning that project at this point in the late 60s, whereas Marcuse is still pretty into it, right? And Marcuse really became the defining feature of the new left, which means that, again, from young Hegelian into Marxist old left into Marcusean new left, all of the leftists are still operating very strongly in this particular frame, this Hegelian dialectical frame. So the dialectic is the operating system of leftism for the past 200 years. Is the point I really want to take home from this first half of what I'm talking.
So I just want to pause there to go, this is his whole theory, that the Hegelian dialectic is, as he says, the operating system of leftists. Operating system like your computer operating system.
You know, when I was in grad school,
Yeah.
I was studying neuroscience, and I also existed on the internet like everyone else. And you would occasionally run into these people that that like to read about neuroscience. You know what I mean? They'd read like abstracts of papers and popular books, but they also like to read about a bunch of other shit too, like quantum mechanics and philosophy and all this shit. And every so often you'd come across one who'd like write their own papers, like their own fucking theories of the brain. And it would be this mix match of all the shit they've read. And I remember one time some guy sent me I shit you not, 40-page diatribe on how quantum mechanics explained behavior from a neuroscience perspective. That's what this fucking feels like to me. This feels like some
100%.
errant bullshit by some hobbyist who's read a few things and now decided they've figured everything out. That's what it feels like.
No, 100%. Going off that, like we used to receive at our philosophy department all the time. So someone would come up, because I worked in a building that was associated with the philosophy of physics. I didn't do the philosophy of physics myself, but like they were my colleagues. And they would always get like emails of just manifestos by people claiming that they have figured out the theory of everything, right? How everything connects. I figured out quantum gravity. We figured it all out, right? And they'll send in their theories as if like, I don't know, the physics department at Western University or the philosophy department of physics at Western University is where you need to send your theory of everything. Granted, they were probably emailing like every university, you know. But yeah, it does feel like that. I mean, like, again, 3 hours and 49 minutes is how long this fucking podcast is. And there was nothing there. It was all like, this is what the dialectical structure is. Look how everyone else who's a leftist mentions dialectics. Yeah, and so we're gonna get this. Watch this. I think as this plays out, it's really enlightening about James' thought process here.
Talking about with Hegel. I also have to make the case that this reliance on dialectic, and I'm telling you, this is going to be long. There's a lot to this. This reliance on the dialectic appears in woke literature as well. So let's start with Patricia Hill Collins' landmark book in 1990, Black Feminist Thought. We're going to see the dialectic invoked repeatedly. Remember also that it appears in the critical race theory book, right? And so the dialectic progresses. The bigger thing gets resolved, so now we have to look at the smaller thing, so the dialectic progresses. That's the theme there in the critical race theory book. Well, here in 1990 in Black Feminist Thought, which is a landmark book, it's not quite critical race theory. It's like the proto-critical race theory. It is Black feminism. And the link, by the way, to Black feminism is that Herbert Marcuse not only did he inspire much of the Black liberationist movement to think in critical theory ways, not only was his ideas picked up by that, but they were particularly picked up by the Black feminists. The Black feminists would have included as a thought leader Angela Davis, who was the PhD student of Herbert Marcuse. And she was very, very influential in the development of Black feminist thought, and Black feminism comes into its fruit here. You can even find, for example, Ibram Kendi praising Angela Davis explicitly in his book Stand from the Beginning, which traces 5 thinkers, one of whom is Angela Davis.
So this is already, doesn't it feel like you have your corkboard out and you're connecting threads? Angela Davis is here, and Herbert Marcuse went here, and so now we're connecting a thread here, and you could see how like the conspiracy web is forming. And really all that's connecting them is critical theory and dialectics.
He's the meme. He's the Always Sunny Charlie connecting dots meme.
He sure is.
This is exactly what this is.
That's all this is.
Oh,
this is what this is for 3 hours and 49 minutes, okay?
This reminds me of like every like 75, 80-year-old professor you have who like was like awesome in their heyday and now they're too old and they just get to think all the time and they've come up with they figured out how like their specific field explains everything about life. Oh my God. You're too young, James. Come back to us. You can still put out a math paper or two.
Yeah, why didn't you just stay in math?
Significant figure in the development of woke thought. Here, right at the cusp of the birth of woke, 1990, in kind of the pinnacle book of Black feminist thought, titled Black Feminist Thought from Patricia Hill Collins, gigantic figure in the field, we read, Black feminism remains important because U.S. Black women constitute an oppressed group. As a collectivity, U.S. Black women participate in a dialectical relationship linking African American women's oppression and activism. So oppression and activism have to be related dialectically. Dialectical relationships of this sort mean that two parties are opposed and opposite. As long as Black women's subordination within intersecting oppressions of race, class, gender, sexuality, and nation persists, Black feminism as an activist response to that oppression will remain needed. In similar fashion, the overarching purpose of U.S. Black feminist thought is also to resist oppression, both its practices and the ideas that justify it. If intersecting oppressions did not exist, Black feminist thought and similar oppositional knowledges would be unnecessary. As a critical social theory, Black feminist thought aims to empower African American women within the context of social injustice sustained by intersecting oppressions. Since Black women cannot be fully empowered unless intersecting oppressions themselves are eliminated, Black feminist thought supports broad principles of social justice that transcend U.S. Black women's particular needs. Dialectical relationships, dialectical thinking, already present here, very core to understanding how Black women as a collectivity, as a political...
So I wanted to pause there, and then we'll finish the last few seconds I have here. But like, notice there, he had to pause every time he was like, critical theory. And then there's here, he mentions them as a collectivity, and he giggles. As if that's supposed to indicate, like, oh, like Black women are a collective. It's like, how is, like, for all of the fanboys who were yelling at me about not making arguments and being an ad hominem type person, he laughed away this scholar's research without even describing why it's wrong. It's just like, she thinks that Black women are a collective. What a great argument by James Lindsay.
Political group are related to all the other axes of oppression and how they're to understand their own oppression and how these oppressions bang up against each other and compete against one another and clamor for attention. And the goal, as we haven't talked about yet, but from Marcuse, is to create solidarity. And that solidarity, as we'll talk about a little bit more later, is to be affected through intersectionality. By the way, the title of Patricia Hill Collins.
I do find it funny. So he's here criticizing solidarity. And yet, did we not hear a call for solidarity from Michael O'Fallon in the last video we watched? That we all need to work together and we all have to collectively fight this thing before it's too late? It's almost like solidarity for we, but not for thee, because they know they need you to remain weak and not in solidarity while they gang up together and defeat us, right?
Next big book after Black Feminist Thought in 1990 was Intersectionality. 1993, if I'm not mistaken, though I don't have it in front of me. So what else does she write in Black Feminist Thought? This dialectic of oppression and activism, the tension between the suppression of African American women's ideas and our intellectual activism in the face of that suppression, constitutes the politics of U.S. Black Feminist Thought. The dialectics of oppression and activism constitutes the politics of U.S. Black Feminist Thought. More important, understanding this dialectical relationship is critical in assessing how U.S. Black Feminist thought, its core themes, epistemological significance, and connections to domestic and transnational Black feminist practice is fundamentally embedded in a political context that has challenged its very right to exist. So, dialectic. It's the central. It is the politics. The dialectic of oppression and activism constitutes the politics of U.S. Black feminist thought. I'm telling you, it's the operating system upon which all of this stuff is based. The critical race theory comes out of Black feminism. Hello.
I mean, notice. Hello. So he read this passage, and all he did was highlight every single time they said critical race theory, dialectical, all this. He scoffed at the idea of Black women being a collective, and then ends by going, "See? It's all about dialectics. See? As if that tells us something interesting here."
With like his understanding of history, and like we've touched on this before with James Lindsay, where it's like talking about how all that exists in his mind is the United States. But with that, like, so obvious that he doesn't actually know the history of the left or leftism, because he was using like the phrase the new left and talking about how like Marcuse was like the main theoretician of it, when like really he was just the Frankfurt dude who didn't go back to Germany after World War II. Like,
yeah, he really likes to focus
Adorno
on those.
And Horkheimer.
He
and
does talk
all of those
about
people.
Adorno and Horkheimer. He just, for some reason, Marcuse takes center stage for him.
Yeah, I mean, but that's because Marcuse stayed in the United States and then taught Angela Davis and so on and so forth. Like, it is kind of a like, okay, like, this is all that matters. It wasn't about the actual like struggles ongoing. It wasn't about the fact that there were international connections going on between left and, like, you know, using the phrase new left, which was a very specific sort of movement in like the 60s and like especially like after the failure of the 6/8 revolutions kind of globally, where it was kind of a like, okay, like the old ways of doing things aren't going to work anymore. We need to do something new. And just like using the phrase new left and then focusing on this like niche set of legal theories is somehow indicative of that new left, when reality it was more like, you know, the Black Panthers in the US and like the Weathermen and the SDS in the American context, and the FLQ here, and the fucking angry brigades in the UK, and the like the Situationists,
people who
and
flashed
the
Adorno.
like yeah, exactly, like Red Army faction and the Red Brigades, and like, you know, these people that then went on to do like fucking urban guerrilla shit, and you know, globally, like there was a new left in Japan, there was a new left like everywhere that was very heavily and international, and he pulls all of that out of that context and is just like, but actually there's just like this little tiny circle of legal theorists and they are the new left, when in reality, like, they were at best adjacent to the new left. Like,
Yeah,
I would place Angela Davis more in their realm, but even then, like, she was kind of post new left for the most part.
there's something that's just like, regardless of his ineptitude in like whether he accurately captures these movements and understands the history. Speaking as someone who obviously has only been reading about this stuff for like the past few years rather than dedicating a significant amount of time to it. There's also the fact of like, why? I mean, there's an obvious answer here. Like, and we joked a bit at the beginning about like us appreciating or being ourselves influenced by people who themselves were influenced by Hegel, right? So like, I'm influenced by Marx, so like there's some part of my lineage that goes back to Hegel as well. But like, there's a question of like, why might people fighting for or like sort of like motivating these theories of critical race theory and fighting for various emancipatory struggles, why might they go back to Hegel or Marx and use the language of dialectics? And the obvious answer is, could it be that that people who want to talk about emancipatory struggles are going to go back to previous works by people who wrote about emancipatory struggles and use the same language and discursive like elements that they used? Like, what? It's not a conspiracy theory. And like, the other element of it is like, he's reading like the introduction to this person's work. Like, even most of the quotes that he brings out in that long podcast were all introductions to books where they're mentioning dialectics. And it's like,
funny.
that leaves out the complete like rest of like, so they took this theory about like emancipatory struggle and now they're applying it newly to their own circumstances and like growing it and evolving it and changing, and like that's what these terms are used for throughout like time. Like, things don't stay the same. You update them, you work, and like, and you borrow where you find it useful. This is just like the progress of shit. So of course these people are going to borrow from that lineage. Where else are they going to borrow it from? Like, it just seems so obvious to me. And yet it's almost like in his mind, he's like, you could tell, like, hello, he's almost talking about it as if it's subterfuge, as if they're like hiding it from us, that it was dialectics all along. If you were trying to hide it, would you shove it in your introduction? Like,
I'm trying to like think of a right-wing version of this. Like, where it's like, they mentioned constitutionalism. They mentioned, like...
I mean, there's elements in which, like
are there just no good right-wing theorists?
No, like, I connect fascists. Like, this person's... Like, one of the criticisms that I got in one of my previous videos on James Lindsay, I just mentioned that he was connected to these sovereign nations people, right? But, like, I didn't just gesture to that. I also was like, here's why that's a problem. And the problem is like, Christian nationalists are bad because they want a Christian nation. And what does that mean? That means to the exclusion of other people. And I think that's morally a problem. They think that, like, you know, diversity, inclusion, and all of those things are moral problems. But what I want to know from them is why. I know why I think Christian nationalism is bad, and I think exclusion is bad, and the reason is because they share a lineage with the types of people that want to block immigration, segregate people, to keep people out there, to eventually do what the Nazis did. You know what I mean? Like, that's their historical lineage, and they never want to own it. They never want to own it. So when I make these connections, I have a reason for pointing to it. They will then use that to us to a certain extent, right? They point to, Soviets, right? But then the question is, then engage there, right? Show us why what we believe is going to lead to what you think is the atrocious thing in Soviet Union, right? But instead, they just take that for granted, leave it over there, and then persist on this level of, like, conspiracy theory ideation where it's all connected, and they're all doing it mysteriously behind our backs and, like, ruining society. When these theorists are shoving it in the introductions of their books, like this, they're not hiding it from you. They just want a better world. God forbid they want a better world, right?
Hello, my rebels. Hello, my rebels. I'm a good boy. I'm a weirdo.